Hi everybody, welcome back to Tuesday Tips for Leaders of Volunteers. I am your host, Dana Litwin, and this week a really interesting Twitter thread on whether mandatory high school student teen volunteer hours is child labor, exploitation, the inequity of that many students have not just a normal barrier to volunteering, but if they're required to do hours to graduate high school, that puts an extra undue barrier and burden on them or their family to kind of meet that requirement. And also some of the discussion covered, is it really volunteering if it's mandatory service? So today for Voluntolds, I'm just focusing in on kind of the teen student aspect of it. There's another Voluntold video that I'll link to at the very end that I did a couple of years ago that has more to do with balancing it out for all kinds of community service court referred. But I really want to focus in on this idea because it's definitely been in the news that corporations are being busted for illegal labor practices employing children, often underpaid children, and just absolutely too young to be working in certain dangerous factory conditions, things like that. So that's all over the news headlines, and that's part of what started this thread and this discussion. I'm all for having really top, great, deep, genuine, sincere engagement with a community that inspires youth to volunteer. That's no one's debating that part, but what we're debating is when you make something mandatory for graduation, that is automatically an inequitable practice for a family, that teen student, if they don't have their driver's license yet, if they can't afford to have their own car, which I couldn't afford to have my own car when I was 16, so I know how that felt. So how can we, in the nonprofit world and even for government agencies, which I've worked for quite a bit, how can we fix that inequity? What's our piece of that puzzle? Well, we can engage more with the schools that are having these requirements. We can create these relationships and say, hey, I'm noticing I'm getting only a certain type of background of teen volunteer because that's the kid who can drive themselves, their parents can drive them, they have their own car, they have the resources and the technology to find volunteer opportunities. So we're not as worried about those kids that have pretty easy access, but it's everyone else who's falling between the cracks, where they're already struggling, their family's already struggling with cost of living, and now they have to find kind of this time to drive kids around to somewhere or get them a bus pass or pay for parking or other out-of-pocket expenses like volunteer uniforms. So there can be this financial barrier and burden that hits certain kids a lot harder than it's going to hit others, even in the same school district. So what we can do, I think, as leaders of volunteers is understand the issue, understand this can be an equity issue, and if you happen to be doing some DEI work, working on diversity, equity, inclusion with your agency, then this can fit into that work really, really well, and tie some of your metrics and processes and practices and make some adjustments to see, can you offer reimbursement or start to write in budget items to help subsidize the cost for kids to come and volunteer with you and remove at least some of those financial barriers, if not the time ones? Can you help adjust the convenience of time for when this volunteer opportunity is happening? Is it happening on weekends, or is it happening during the school day or after school when they need to just get home and do dinner and do homework? So just, I think, being mindful of where these teen student opportunities can cross a line and be unfair practices for the teens trying to do them, and how we can help balance that out and remove some of those barriers and burdens. And also talking to schools. Schools are, and teachers and education in general is ridiculously, horribly underfunded in the United States. That's something bigger, it's a bigger issue to work on. But can you work with schools or community groups or friends of, or certain grants or other avenues to get the funding to really invest in equity for these types of volunteer roles and cost reimbursements, cost coverage, so that it's less time and expense out of pocket for the student and their family. So one example of this that's a personal example to me is I've done a lot of work being a Conservation Corps member when I was younger, typically that age is 18 to 21, sometimes the programs go up to 25, but young adults out of high school, college age. But most conservation corps also they pay typically minimum wage or stipend. So there's already very low pay for Conservation Corps programs, and I love them and they're great. But we need to recognize that they're already underfunded and the pay is too low. And many of them have the similar requirement to graduate from a charter school or a job training program with Conservation Corps, where those same crews that are doing conservation work, building trails, cleaning up recycling, cleaning up beaches and creeks, whatever they're doing during the week, there's a certain amount of volunteer hours that they have to do. And that definitely, and when I had to do it, and when I've actually with government agencies manage teams like this, I kind of pointed this out, that this is the exact same job they're doing, but today they're just not getting paid for it. So how does that help them enjoy volunteering? That feels really bad on an individual level, like, well, this is the exact same job I did yesterday, but I'm not making $100 from it today, or even $50. I'm making zero money from it today, but I'm still required to do it. So that's one example where it definitely crosses over into exploitation, although usually it's not minors, it's usually people who are 18 or over. But that's a pretty common example of what I'm talking about, of where this is starting to really cross an equity line, and ethically, even if it's technically legal to do all of that, and this is a process we've been in. So examine where you are in the teen volunteer high school hours pipeline, if that's something you even participate in, or you just never have roles that are meaningful. And as an action item, again, do some really deep community engagement with schools, with corporations, with other groups. You may be able to, if not directly from your organization's funding or the school's budget, which are strapped pretty hard, but is there some other grant or some other program that you can participate in that can help support these teens overcome these time and money barriers that are so common, to get a good experience volunteering. And that's really the final point of anything about Voluntolds, because I don't think they're going away anytime soon. But make sure that whatever work is being done is like really impactful and meaningful, and the people doing it understand the connection to the mission and the agency and the cause and the community. And if you're just creating busy work for people, then that's a burden on you, and that's an undue burden on the student, and that's like reinforcing the worst possible way to do civic engagement and inspire youth to give to the community and to volunteer their time or be really interested in that. So I hope that you've enjoyed these Tuesday tips about Voluntolds, a little bit of a different subject. I will link to the Twitter thread below, so you can follow along or contribute to the conversation. And let me know what you think. Do you work with teens? Do you work with programs that require teens to do certain service hours to graduate? Are you mainly getting them from one school in your district, or is it more of a variety of neighborhoods and backgrounds? So let me know what you think in the comments below, and I look forward to further discussion, and we'll come back with more Tuesday tips next week. See you then.